House Republican leaders on Thursday night delayed a vote on an immigration bill until next week. We'll get a report from Washington in a moment. But we start on the border, where First Lady Melania Trump made an impromptu visit on Thursday. David Begnaud filed this report from McAllen, Texas.
Melania Trump began her unexpected border visit at Upbring New Hope Children's Shelter with an offer of help.
How I can help to these children to reunite with their families as quickly as possible.
A handful of the nearly 60 children housed here have been separated from their parents. Kurt Sinsky is CEO.
Most of the children here have escaped some pretty horrific situations where they've been asked to join gangs. They have said no to joining gangs, and then they're worried about their own lives. And so they're escaping some pretty horrific situations.
The First Lady's tour was nearly overshadowed by her choice to wear a Zara jacket, which she took off before touring the facility. It read, "I really don't care. Do you?" The First Lady's spokeswoman said there was no hidden message with the jacket. President Trump fired off a tweet saying the jacket refers to the fake news media. Melania has learned how dishonest they are, and she truly no longer cares. This morning's stop was less than 24 hours after President Trump, under intense pressure, signed the executive order temporarily halting the separation of children from their parents who crossed the border illegally. The timeline for reuniting more than 2,300 children with their parents remains far from clear. We reached out to multiple government agencies for answers on when and how it would be done. So far, no clear response. Minors as young as 8 months old have already been sent to one of 100 shelters in 17 states. Bob Kerry was director for the Office of Refugee Resettlement under President Obama.
There is currently no system in place to reunite children with parents who are in detention.
We learned Thursday morning that federal prosecutors declined to file illegal entry charges against 17 individuals who were arrested for crossing the border illegally with their children. There was one legal observer in the courtroom that we spoke with who was really surprised, wondering if that signaled some sort of change, because under President Trump's zero-tolerance policy, every adult who crosses the border illegally is supposed to be prosecuted. David Begnaud, CBS News, McAllen, Texas.
Sean Sullivan is a congressional reporter for The Washington Post. He joins me now from Washington. So, Sean, President Trump is blaming Democrats for a lack of legislation on immigration, but his own party was split on a conservative immigration bill on Thursday. Now, House Republicans, we know, huddled Thursday night. Do we know, Sean, what they talked about?
Well, what they talked about was trying to find a path forward so that they could get enough votes to pass this compromise bill that they've been working on for weeks. But the reality is, at the end of this meeting, it didn't seem like the votes were there yet. And so what they decided to do is essentially punt this to next week. They were supposed to hold a vote on this compromise bill today. Then they delayed that until tomorrow. Now they've delayed it again, and it's going to happen next week. At least that's the plan. We'll see, in the coming days if it gets delayed again, if it gets scuttled completely. But you're right. The president's own party right now controls the House of Representatives, and they are the ones who are struggling to come up with a bill that they could pass. I mean, they have a majority in the House, and if they could get their members unified behind a bill, they wouldn't need any Democratic votes. That's the reality of the situation right now. So it's another struggle for Paul Ryan. It's another struggle for his team on Capitol Hill, and another round of disagreements and infighting between House Republicans over an issue, immigration, that has plagued them for years. This is an issue that's divided the party for a very, very long time. And we're seeing the same situation play out over and over again, and this is the latest chapter, Elaine.
Well, as you noted, the House is supposed to vote on that compromise bill next week. What are the chances of that passing?
Right now, it's really up in the air. I mean, if they had the votes now, they would go ahead with this vote and hold it right now or first thing in the morning tomorrow. So the fact that they're not suggests that they don't have the votes. And, I was outside that meeting on Capitol Hill earlier, and one member came out and said, look, the fact that we're going through this bill line by line, section by section, shows you that they don't have the votes. And so right now it's really, really iffy. There's a lot of members who seem very, very skeptical about this bill. And there are members that are upset. They feel that their input hasn't been taken into account. They would prefer a more open and transparent debate on the House floor. and they're not seeing that, and we're seeing the frustration kind of boil over and come out in these closed-door meetings, and so it's not surprising that we're seeing this vote get delayed over and over again.
So speaking of transparency, do we know what's in the bill?
Well, we know the general structure and the basic sort of cornerstones of the bill. This bill does have money for President Trump's border wall. It does provide a path to citizenship for young undocumented immigrants known as Dreamers, and it does attempt to try to keep families together when they are apprehended at the border. But of course, the details are what is going to make or break this bill. And right now, we're seeing some behind-the-scenes negotiations between members play out. And so there are some details, some things that could change between now and next week. But the reality is, I think a lot of Republicans in the House want to see the president come out more forcefully for this bill. We've kind of seen some mixed signals from the president, from the White House about what he would or wouldn't sign. And so I think Republicans look at this delay as a chance for Trump to come out and say, I support this, I don't support this. And that would make their job easier as they try to finalize and write this bill and hopefully, in their view, pass it in the coming days.
Well, these immigration votes we know were set before President Trump signed that executive order ending his administration's family separation policy. How much did that factor into what we actually saw took place on Capitol Hill Thursday?
Well, I think it added some urgency to these talks in the minds of a lot of Republicans. They want to do something. They don't want to be seen as, doing nothing in the face of this crisis on the border. And even though President Trump signed that executive order, a lot of lawmakers in both parties that I talked to on the Hill this week said that they still feel like they need to do something legislatively. They feel like Trump's executive order could get tied up in the courts. It could face numerous legal challenges. So they feel like their work here isn't done, and they feel an urgency to act. And I think that's why you're seeing this effort continue, even though it looks like at this point they may not have the votes to pass this thing.
So, I mean, we started our conversation with you noting how intractable an issue this has been, particularly for the Republican Party. So I guess the question is, now that you have, though, an unconventional president who has made clear what is important to him is the border wall, that's a campaign promise he intends to keep, how much pressure are lawmakers under to pass something at this point?
I think they're under, a lot of pressure from all sides right now. You have on the right side of the Republican Party, the sort of hard right part of the party, they feel pressure to deliver on those promises you mentioned, including the border wall, because Trump campaigned aggressively on constructing that border wall. Then you have a lot of moderate centrist Republicans in sort of swing districts who are up for re-election this year, and they know that they could face a really difficult re-election. And they feel pressure to do something to protect Dreamers, to protect undocumented immigrants. They also feel pressure to keep families together at the border and prevent these family separations. So you're seeing these sort of dual pressures from different parts of the Republican spectrum. But the reality is there is a pressure to act, to do something. But what's holding this thing up is, what that something is. And I think a lot of Republicans, including Trump, disagree about what that something is that they should do on immigration.
All right. Sean Sullivan in Washington for us. Sean, thank you very much.
Thanks, Elaine.